Welcome, welcome back again to Strategic Change Management, Learning with Dr. Linda. Yes, I'm going to be now sharing with you about a topic on how to manage complex change. Now, when you think about management of complex change, there are some ingredients or there are some things that are included for that change to actually be successful. I want you to think about managing change like you would think about preparing a meal from a recipe. In this recipe, there are so many ingredients that you require for the meal to actually be successful. And in case any of those things is missing, then you get to have a different outcome from what you intended to have. Now, the list of the things I'm providing here is not comprehensive, because there are other things that can affect the change processes and result to the change being either successful or unsuccessful. So there are 5 variables that are very critical for any successful change process. We have the vision, the skills, incentives, resources, and the action plan. Now, if any of these key essential things is missing, then you get another outcome. Say, for instance, if you do not have a vision that is clear, compelling, articulated, a vision that people can buy into, a vision that people are able to imagine their place in the future, then you're likely to have confusion, even though you have all the other requirements being available. Assume for an instance, if you do not have the requisite skill set, whenever people don't have the skills to do something, of course, they're likely to be anxious. Probably you want to automate your systems, but if people do not have the digital skills, the technology skills to actualize that, then they're likely to have a lot of anxiety. Now, you could have the vision and the skills, but if the incentives are lacking or they're not well aligned, where incentives are not aligned with the outcomes, where the reward is not aligned to the effort, where people do not see an action-reaction relationship between what they do and what they get, then if they do not resist the change because of lack of incentive, they could have change, but you're likely to have very gradual changes. Now, in instances where you have the vision, you have the skills, you have the incentives, but you do not have resources, people do not have the materials, the equipment, they are not feeling empowered in terms of what they need, the tools, the techniques, for them to actually actualize the change processes, of course, there's likelihood of frustration, feeling defeated, feeling not able to do anything. And if you have everything else and you have no action plan, you guessed it right. There will be a false start. You will always be starting, you'll always be telling yourself, I want to do this. You will not be doing because you do not have a start by date. Now, here comes my other assignment. I would want you to review the 5 outcomes and look at the country where you are currently. You would be in Kenya, Africa, East Africa, a country in East Africa, maybe you're in an African country, maybe you're in the United States. I don't know the country you could be watching me from, but I would want you to identify some organizations or some change efforts that you would say, this change effort was successful because the vision was clear, we had the right skills, we had the right incentives, we had the resources, and there was an action plan. I would also want you to identify instances where there was confusion. Confusion because maybe there was no vision, or even though it was there, it was not clear, or even though it was clear, it was not compelling. Something just didn't hack with you and that vision. Or maybe people had lost skills. They were feeling anxious. And so maybe this change could have come and it would have been successful, but people were not empowered in terms of their skills. Or there were no incentives aligned to the actions and to the efforts of the individual members. And so even though there was change, it was very gradual. Or better still, there was frustration because the resources were not available, or you had a false start. I want you to think about different companies. Which companies do you think had these kinds of outcomes, and provide your reason for that? So what do you do then when you realize that people are resisting change? What are some of the um, strategies can a change manager put in place to reduce the resistance to change? Number one, you could educate and communicate to the people. Education and communication. This is usually the best strategy whenever you are faced with a situation of resistance or you're faced with a change process. And it is mostly used where people don't have enough information, or more so, they do not have accurate information. But it has a drawback. It could be time consuming and it might involve a lot of people, hence delaying in terms of decision making. Nevertheless, education and communication still becomes the first go-to method of managing resistance to organizational change. Then we have participation and involvement. Now, participation and involvement is also a very important and a very critical way in which you can manage resistance to organizational change. But this is also used where the initiators do not have all the information they need to design the change and where others have considerable power to resist. Think about where organizations have, say, trade unions, or think about where organizational members have worked in that organization for so long that they feel you are an outsider coming in. In that case, you need to involve these people in the decision making. You need to involve them, let them participate, let them feel involved. That way, they're going to be more pro the change. So, of course, it's also time consuming, but once used, can be very successful. Then we have facilitation and support. This is where people are resisting because of fear and anxiety. And we just said earlier that one way of managing complex change is by empowering people through skill set that you provide them. So facilitation and support, this is where you facilitate them. You provide to them the skill set. You provide them avenues of empowering themselves, acquiring new skills, acquiring new abilities, shifting their mindsets, working on them so that they can be more willing to accept the change processes. Now, this approach is very good with employee and customer problems, especially if you're bringing a new system in place, maybe you're digitalizing your systems. It is a very good approach. However, definitely time consuming and quite expensive. The other way of dealing with resistance to change could be negotiations and agreement. Now, this is where there's likelihood to be a win and a lose situation. Some people are likely to lose, other people are likely to win. Say, for example, where there are trade unions and there's the argument of maybe a pay rise, and then the management is seeking for people maybe to be added more responsibility. Definitely, there are those who are going to lose and there are those who are going to gain. Now, where some people or some group are will clearly lose out in a group, and where the group has considerable power to resist through, say, strikes or lobbying or etc. So sometimes it is relatively easy way to avoid major resistance. However, it can also be very expensive. So as we go down, the methods and the strategies become a little bit not appropriate, but definitely they could actually work in some instances. We also see some organizations dealing with manipulation and co-optation. You co-opt the person who is resisting, divided role. I don't know the ethical implications of that, but these are strategies that organizations use. They co-opt one of the members who is resisting and to break the group. It could be a way of destabilizing the group so that people are more malleable to accept the change processes. It is still a strategy. Now, this one is good. It has its drawback also, because sometimes people might feel manipulated. They might also feel they were cheated. They might feel like they are no longer a group, and sometimes it can cause future problems whenever you're introducing change. And definitely, there's the fifth way. This is actually the final way: coercion. Not the right, not the best, but definitely sometimes people have to be coerced, and we see this happening over and over again. But the beauty in learning all these methods is understanding them and realizing which method might work for what situation and which method may not work for whatever situation. Till then, have a wonderful time. That marks the end of our lesson. I would wish that you review these methods of dealing with resistance to change, in addition to the managing of complex change, and try to review what kind of methods have your organizations adopted, or which methods have you seen being adopted as ways of managing resistance to change. Next lesson, we're going to be learning about the perspectives of organizational change. Thank you. Until then, have a wonderful time. Goodbye.